She was humiliated and thrown out of her own hotel in front of everyone, unable to fight back. Seconds later, she returned accompanied by a millionaire who changed everything. What seemed like a common injustice hid a much larger secret. And when the truth came to light, no one was prepared for what happened. If this beautiful story of resilience and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The taxi pulled up in front of the imposing entrance of the Grand Sovereign Hotel in the heart of the Upper East Side in New York City. Madeline Sterling looked through the window at the facade she knew by heart. Every architectural detail, every strategically positioned light fixture. That was the first hotel she had opened 23 years ago, back when no one believed a woman of humble origins, coming from rural Vermont, could build an empire in the hospitality industry. Today, the Sovereign Group had 18 units spread across the country, but that building remained the heart of it all. She paid the fare and stepped out with a small suitcase, wearing jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a discreet blouse. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail. She wore no elaborate makeup and none of the jewelry she usually wore to corporate events. Nothing that could betray who she truly was. Madeline wanted to go unnoticed. She wanted to see with her own eyes what dozens of anonymous complaints had been reporting for months. Veiled discrimination, biased treatment, and abuse of power disguised as excellence in service. Management always denied it. Internal reports showed perfect numbers, impeccable reviews, and satisfied customers. But the complaints didn't stop coming. They were too detailed to be ignored, too consistent to be invented. Madeline decided she wouldn't trust intermediaries this time. She needed to feel firsthand what really happened when someone arrived without a premium guest gold card, without the last name that opened doors, and without the appearance that society deemed worthy of respect. As she crossed the revolving doors, the air conditioning enveloped her along with the lobby's signature scent, an exclusive fragrance developed specifically for the chain. The lobby was exactly as she had planned: high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, Italian marble floors, and genuine leather sofas strategically placed. Everything was designed to convey elegance without exaggeration, comfort without ostentation. Madeline walked to the front desk, pulling her rolling suitcase. 2 receptionists were working the counter. The younger one, with neatly combed hair and an impeccable uniform, was busy with an elegant couple, smiling broadly as he explained the amenities of the presidential suite. The other receptionist, a woman in her 40s with a tired expression, was typing something on the computer without looking up. Madeline stood in front of the counter and waited. A few seconds passed. The receptionist continued typing as if Madeline were invisible. On the other side, the young man concluded his service to the couple with effusive cordiality, wishing them an excellent stay and offering complimentary champagne. When the couple walked away, Madeline expected the young receptionist to call her. Instead, he picked up a clipboard and began checking documents, not even glancing in her direction. It was the woman who finally looked up with an expression that was nowhere near welcoming. "Can I help you?" she asked in the tone of someone performing a mechanical task. "I have a reservation," Madeline replied calmly, keeping her voice steady. "Madeline Sterling." The receptionist typed the name slowly, looked at the screen and frowned. "What was the last name again?" "Sterling, Sterling." A few more seconds of slow, almost purposeful typing. "I'm not finding it. Do you have the confirmation number?" Madeline opened her bag and showed the confirmation on her phone. The woman glanced at it, went back to the computer and typed again, this time with an audible sigh. "Oh, here it is. Standard room, 3 nights." "That's correct. ID and credit card, please." Madeline handed over the documents. While the receptionist processed everything with calculated slowness, Madeline observed the surroundings. On the other side of the lobby, the young receptionist was now attending to a family. He was smiling, gesturing, offering a category upgrade, and explaining the breakfast options with genuine enthusiasm. The contrast was crystal clear. The woman handed back the documents without looking Madeline in the eye. "Done. Room 312, 3rd floor. Breakfast is from 6 to 10. Elevators to the left." Madeline took the key card but didn't move immediately. And the orientation regarding the facilities, the gym, spa, restaurants. The receptionist pointed vaguely toward a rack of brochures. "It's all in there. Anything else?" The tone was one of clear dismissal. Madeline felt a tightening in her chest, an old painful sensation she hadn't felt in years. Was this how people felt when they were treated as if they didn't belong in certain spaces, as if their presence was a tolerated nuisance? She took a brochure and walked toward the elevator, observing everything. She passed a group of guests being led to the bar by a smiling staff member. None of them wore particularly luxurious clothes, but they carried a certain posture, a confidence that seemed to be the true criterion for distinction there. The room was comfortable and clean, with a well-made bed and a discreet view of the city. Madeline left her suitcase by the closet and sat in the armchair by the window. She took a deep breath, trying to process her first impression. There was nothing scandalous about what had happened, nothing that could be easily proven as direct discrimination. But the difference in treatment was undeniable. The calculated coldness, the lack of cordiality, the deliberate disinterest. She took her phone and mentally noted everything she had observed. Then she decided to explore the hotel. She went back down to the lobby, this time heading to the main restaurant. It was early evening, and the place was moderately busy. A maitre d' received her at the entrance with a quick evaluative look. "Good evening, do you have a reservation?" "No, I'm just here for dinner." He consulted a tablet with a doubtful expression. "We are quite busy tonight. It might take about 40 minutes. Madeline looked around. Several tables were empty, clearly available. "Are there no free tables right now?" "Those tables are reserved," he replied without elaborating. At that moment, a couple arrived behind her. The maitre d' immediately flashed a smile. "Good evening, so good to see you again. Would you like your usual table?" The couple nodded and were led directly to a window table. Exactly one of the tables the maitre d' had just said was reserved. Madeline felt her indignation grow, but she kept her composure. "I'll wait then. 40 minutes, right?" "It might be a bit longer, actually, but you can leave your room number and we'll notify you when it's ready." She gave her room number and returned to the lobby, her heart racing. It wasn't exactly anger. It was a mixture of sadness and deep disappointment. This was the hotel she had created with her own hands, where every detail had been designed to welcome people. And now she was witnessing a silent system of exclusion, operating with terrifying naturalness. She sat on one of the sofas and watched. Over the next half hour, she saw the pattern repeat several times. Some guests were received with reverence, others with polite indifference. The criteria were subtle but evident: clothes, posture, accent, general appearance. Those who didn't fit the expected mold received protocol-heavy, cold, distant service. Those who met expectations were treated like members of an exclusive club. The phone rang. "Your table is ready, ma'am." The voice was impersonal. Madeline returned to the restaurant and was led to a corner table far from the windows near the kitchen door. She took the menu and placed her order. The meal was served with mechanical efficiency, lacking the charm the waiters showed other customers. When the bill arrived, Madeline noticed an additional charge. There was an item described as a premium service fee in the amount of $150, which was not on the menu. She called the waiter and pointed to the charge. "Excuse me, I don't understand this amount. What is a premium service fee?" The waiter glanced at it and replied emotionlessly, "It's a surcharge for specialized service." "But I didn't ask for any specialized service. This wasn't on the menu." "It's in the restaurant's terms of use, ma'am. All guests are subject to it." Madeline kept her voice calm but firm. "I would like to see where this is specified, please." The waiter sighed with visible impatience. "I'll call the manager." Minutes later, a man in a dark suit approached the table with decisive steps. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with well-cut graying hair and an expression that mixed authority with ill-disguised disdain. The name tag on his chest read, "Richard Caldwell, General Manager." "What seems to be the problem?" he said without even a greeting. Madeline explained the charge. Richard looked at the bill with a dismissive gesture. "The fee is correct. It's part of the house policy." "But it wasn't disclosed on the menu. How is a customer supposed to know they'll be charged for this?" "The terms are available at the front desk and on the website," he replied in a sharp tone. "If you didn't inform yourself beforehand, that is your responsibility." Madeline felt her blood boil, but she maintained her composure. "I would like to speak with someone from the hotel administration about this practice." Richard crossed his arms and looked her up and down, evident judgment in his eyes. I am the administration of this hotel, and the fee is correct. If you cannot afford to pay, I suggest you choose establishments more suited to your standard next time." The silence that followed was heavy. Madeline felt the atmosphere around her freeze. Some people at nearby tables had stopped talking and were watching the scene with curiosity. She was being publicly humiliated, treated as if she had no right to question anything, as if her very presence there was a mistake. "I will pay the bill," Madeline said with a controlled voice, "but I want to file a formal complaint about this charge and the treatment I've received." Richard let out a short, bitter laugh. "You are free to complain wherever you like, but while you are in this hotel, you will respect our rules, and if you continue to cause a disturbance, I will have to ask you to leave." "Cause a disturbance?" Madeline repeated, incredulous. "I am simply questioning an irregular charge." "This is a lack of respect for the establishment's authority," he replied, intentionally raising his voice. "I will not tolerate guests who disrespect the order of the house. You have 2 minutes to pay the bill and leave the restaurant. Otherwise, I will call security." Madeline felt the world spin. This was actually happening. She was being kicked out of her own hotel in front of dozens of people, treated like a criminal for simply questioning an abusive charge. She stood up slowly, picked up her bag, and placed her credit card on the table. "I will pay and leave, but know that this will not end here." Richard took the card with disdain and handed it to the waiter. As soon as the transaction was completed, he pointed to the door. "The exit is that way, and I suggest you pack your things and leave the hotel today. We don't want problematic guests." Madeline walked toward the restaurant exit with the dignity she had left, but feeling every curious gaze, every whisper, every cell phone discreetly filming her. The humiliation was complete, public, and irreversible. When she reached the lobby, her legs were shaking. She leaned against a marble column, taking deep breaths, trying to control the emotions threatening to overflow. Old memories came back in full force. She remembered being young, newly arrived in New York, being rejected from hotels because she didn't look like someone who could pay. She remembered the closed doors, the looks of contempt, the feeling of not belonging anywhere. She had spent decades building an empire precisely so that would never happen again. And now, in the hotel she herself had founded, she was being treated exactly the same way. She took out her phone with trembling hands and searched for a name in her contact list. She hesitated for a moment, looking at the name on the screen. They hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years, since everything between them had ended abruptly and painfully. But in that moment, he was the only person she could trust, the only one with the power and influence necessary for what she needed to do. She pressed the call button and put the phone to her ear. He answered on the second ring. "Madeline?" His voice was deep, surprised. "What happened?" "I need you," she said, feeling her voice fail for the first time. "I need you to come here now, please." There was a brief pause, and then the response came with absolute determination. "Tell me where you are. I'm on my way." Madeline remained leaning against the marble column in the lobby, trying to regain her emotional balance. The call still echoed in her ears. Robert Montgomery, the man who had once been her safe harbor before the pride of both, built an impassable abyss between them. Around her, movement continued normally. Guests entered and exited, staff circulated with professional smiles. Everything was perfectly orchestrated, a flawless facade hiding the silent rot she had just witnessed. 20 minutes later, the revolving doors opened and Robert entered. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his black hair slightly graying at the temples. Tall, with an athletic build and a serious expression. Robert owned an investment conglomerate that moved billions, a man whose name opened doors in the most exclusive circles in the country. And he was there for her. Robert's eyes scanned the lobby until they found her. The concern on his face was genuine and immediate. He walked toward her with decisive steps, and Madeline stood up, feeling her heart race not just because of the situation, but because of his proximity after so long. "Madeline," he said as he reached her, his voice low but heavy with urgency. "Are you okay?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words failed. Robert wrapped her in a protective embrace. Madeline allowed herself to stay there for a moment, feeling the solidity of the embrace she had once known so well. "Tell me," he whispered, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. Madeline took a deep breath and, with a voice firmer than she expected, told him everything. The discreet arrival, the cold treatment, the evident discrimination, the abusive charge, the public humiliation orchestrated by Richard Caldwell. As she spoke, she saw Robert's expression gradually change from concern to contained indignation. "He did that to you?" Robert repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "He kicked you out of the restaurant publicly and told me to leave the hotel," Madeline added, "as if I were a criminal for questioning an irregular fee." Robert looked around the lobby, his eyes scanning every detail with strategic evaluation. Then he reached out his hand to her. "Come with me." They walked together toward the reception desk. The change was immediate. The young receptionist, who had ignored Madeline hours earlier, now straightened up with an anxious smile, because everyone there recognized Robert Montgomery. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery," the young man said with reverence. "It is an honor to have you with us. How can we help you?" Robert did not smile. "I want to speak with the general manager now." The receptionist picked up the phone with trembling hands. While they waited, Madeline felt Robert's hand find hers, a discreet but significant gesture. Minutes later, Richard Caldwell emerged from the administrative corridor with a political smile already formed on his lips. But the smile faltered when he saw who was waiting. "Mr. Montgomery, what a pleasant surprise. We didn't know you would be with us today." Robert offered no courtesy. "You kicked this woman out of the restaurant less than an hour ago, correct?" Richard blinked, confused, looking quickly at Madeline as if seeing her for the first time. "There was a misunderstanding, sir. The lady was contesting a legitimate charge and caused a small disturbance. I had to take measures to maintain order." "A small disturbance," Robert repeated, his voice cutting. "She questioned a fee that wasn't disclosed, and you humiliated her publicly. Is that your definition of maintaining order?" The manager turned pale. "Mr. Montgomery, if we had known she had any connection to you, obviously we would have handled the situation differently." "That is exactly the problem," Robert said, taking a step forward. "The treatment shouldn't be different. It should be dignified for everyone, but you treat people differently based on what exactly? Appearance? Clothes? Last names?" Richard opened his mouth, but no convincing defense came out. We maintain standards of excellence, sir. Our guests expect a certain level." Madeline decided it was time to speak. She stepped forward, facing Richard. "I would like to see the security footage from the restaurant from the last hour, and I also need you to show me exactly where this fee is specified in the materials available to guests." Richard looked at Robert as if expecting him to intervene. That is an unusual demand. We don't have a procedure for—" "Find a procedure," Robert cut him off, "and fast." The manager hesitated, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "I will need superior authorization for the footage, but I can show you the terms of service." He led them to a small administrative room, where he opened a computer and navigated through documents. After several minutes of uncomfortable searching, it became clear that the fee was not specified anywhere in an accessible way. It was an arbitrary charge, applied selectively. Madeline crossed her arms. "So you charge customers a fee that isn't disclosed, and when questioned, you humiliate the person publicly." Richard was visibly sweating now. "It was a communication error, ma'am. We can reverse the charge and—" "It's not about the money," Madeline interrupted, her voice firm. "It's about how you treat people, and I'm sure I'm not the first to go through this here." There was a heavy silence. Robert watched everything, letting Madeline lead the situation. "I want all the security camera footage preserved," Madeline said. "Nothing is to be deleted, and I want the names of all the employees who were on duty today." Richard looked genuinely scared now. "Ma'am, with all due respect, these are very specific demands. May I ask what exactly is your interest in this situation?" Madeline exchanged a quick look with Robert. He gave a slight nod. She took a deep breath and then spoke with clarity. "My interest is that this hotel, which carries the name of my company, does not continue operating with discriminatory practices. I am Madeline Sterling, the founder and owner of the Sovereign Group, and you just kicked the owner of the establishment out." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard turned white, his mouth hanging open in shock. That isn't possible," Richard finally whispered. "I never come here announced," Madeline added, "precisely because I wanted to see how things work when the owner isn't looking. and what I found was worse than I imagined. Richard staggered, holding onto the desk. "Miss Sterling, I didn't know. If I had known, I never—" "That's exactly it," Madeline said. "You didn't know who I was, so you treated me like trash. But what about all the other people you treated like this? Those who didn't have anyone to call?" Robert finally spoke. "I suggest you do exactly what Ms. Sterling asked. Preserve the footage, gather the employee names, and prepare a detailed report, now." Richard nodded frantically and left, almost tripping, leaving Madeline and Robert alone. When the door closed, Madeline felt her legs weaken. Robert was by her side in an instant. "Sit," he said gently. "You don't have to do everything right now." "Yes, I do," Madeline replied. "I need to know how deep this goes." Robert knelt beside her chair. "Madeline, you were incredible, but you also went through something traumatic. Let me help you." Madeline's eyes met his. There was so much history between them. Robert had been the only man she had truly loved, but work, diverging ambitions, the fear of losing her independence, everything had pulled them apart 5 years ago. "Why did you come, Robert?" she asked softly. "After everything, why did you come running?" He held her hand. "Because when you call asking for help, nothing else matters. I tried to move on, Madeline, but you were always here." He touched his own chest. Madeline felt her eyes sting. "We ended for good reasons. I couldn't give up my work, my independence." "I never asked you to give up anything," he replied. "I just wanted to be by your side, but you were so afraid of depending on someone." "Because I knew that if I let you in for real, I wouldn't be able to function without you," Madeline admitted. "And I had spent my whole life proving I could survive alone." Robert squeezed her hands. "But you don't need to survive, Madeline. You deserve to live, and living doesn't mean being alone." Before she could respond, the door opened. A woman in her 50s wearing a maid's uniform entered hurriedly. When she saw Madeline, her eyes widened. "Miss Sterling," the woman said, her voice urgent. "I know who you are. I've worked here for 15 years, and I need you to know that what happened today was not an isolated case." Madeline stood up immediately, all vulnerability replaced by total attention. "Continue." The woman looked nervously behind her. "My name is Sarah, and I've been noting everything I've seen happen here for years. Every time I saw people being treated poorly because of their skin color, the way they talked, their clothes. Every time I saw Richard give orders not to accept certain types of reservations." She pulled out a worn bag and took out 3 old notebooks. "It's all in here, dates, names, descriptions. I never had the courage to do anything because I knew I'd be fired. But now, with you here, maybe something can change." Madeline took the notebooks with trembling hands. She opened the first one and began to read. Page after page of detailed accounts. They were years of documented injustices. Robert read over her shoulder. "This is evidence of a pattern," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "And it's not just here. I've seen suspicious transfers of employees who question things. I've seen deals made to silence guests who threatened to sue." Madeline closed the notebook and looked at Sarah. "You kept this for 15 years. Why?" "Because someone needed to remember," Sarah replied. "Someone needed to witness." "It matters now," Madeline said firmly, "and you will be protected." Sarah left with that promise. When the door closed, Madeline and Robert were in silence. "This goes beyond Richard," Robert said. "This is structural." Madeline nodded. "I built this company promising to create spaces where everyone was welcome, and I failed." Robert held her face. "You didn't fail. You discovered it. And now you're going to fix it, but you don't have to do it alone. Let me stay by your side this time." Madeline held his wrists. The temptation to accept was almost irresistible, but the old fear was still there. "I don't know if I can, Robert." "Then let me show you that you can," he replied and kissed her. The kiss was soft at first, but Madeline responded, and suddenly 5 years of longing exploded between them. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Robert leaned his forehead against hers. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." "Neither did I," she confessed. But before they could say more, Robert's phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and his face darkened. "I see, thank you." He hung up and looked at Madeline. "One of my media contacts alerted me. There are videos of your incident in the restaurant circulating on social media, and the narrative is being distorted." Madeline felt a chill in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "They're painting you as the cause of the conflict. The videos have been edited to remove context." "Who would do that?" Madeline asked. Robert hesitated. Someone with an interest in harming you. Someone who wants to see you fall. The New York night felt heavy as Madeline and Robert left the administrative room. The hotel lobby seemed charged with tension. Employees whispered in corners. Curious gazes followed Madeline's every step. Madeline walked beside Robert, feeling the weight of Sarah's notebooks in her bag. Those pages contained lives marked by injustice, wounded dignities. And now, with the manipulated videos circulating, the situation was gaining a much more dangerous dimension. "We need to see these videos," Madeline said quietly as they crossed the lobby. Robert nodded. "I've already asked my team to gather everything circulating. Let's go somewhere more private." They left the hotel and got into Robert's car, a black Mercedes. The privacy of the vehicle brought relief. Madeline leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment. Robert took his phone and turned the screen toward Madeline. "Look at this." The video began. Madeline recognized the scene, but the editing was surgical. All the moments where Richard treated her with contempt had been cut. What remained was only Madeline questioning the bill, her voice sounding loud out of context, followed by Richard trying to calm her down. Then the expulsion, filmed from an angle that made it look like Madeline was causing a scene. The captions were worse. "Arrogant customer humiliates staff. Businesswoman thinks she's above the rules." Madeline felt her stomach churn. It was a complete inversion of the truth. "How many views?" she asked. Robert hesitated. 300,000 in the last 2 hours and growing. Madeline closed her eyes. 300,000 people seeing a lie. "There's more," Robert said. "This was posted by an account specializing in exposing abuses by wealthy people. It has almost 1 million followers." The second video was even more elaborate. It included old photos of Madeline at events, contrasting them with the incident. The narrative was of a powerful woman who thought she could treat anyone poorly. The comments were a torrent of indignation. "Someone orchestrated this very fast," Robert said. "It wasn't spontaneous." Madeline looked out the car window, watching the city lights pass. "Or they created the opportunity," she murmured. Robert turned to her. "You think the incident was a setup?" "I don't know," Madeline answered honestly. "But the speed with which this was turned into ammunition against me, the professional editing of the videos, the right choice of accounts to disseminate it, that's not amateur work." The car stopped in front of an elegant building in Tribeca. Robert lived in the penthouse. They went up in silence. The door opened to a wide modern space with windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Madeline walked in and allowed herself to breathe. Robert poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "Drink, you need it." Madeline accepted and drank, feeling the liquid burn. Robert sat beside her on the sofa. Madeline's phone rang. It was Julianne, her partner and best friend, Madeline answered. "Madeline, for God's sake, what is happening?" Julianne's voice was urgent. "I'm seeing these videos. This can't be true." "It's not true, Jules. It was all edited, manipulated." "But people are believing it. The phones won't stop. Journalists, guests cancelling reservations, investors asking for explanations. This is turning into a massive crisis." Madeline closed her eyes. "I know, I'm trying to understand who is behind it." "You need to speak out, Madeline. If you stay silent, their narrative will solidify." "Not yet," Madeline replied. "First, I need to be sure of the facts. I have evidence of systematic discrimination, whole notebooks of records. This goes beyond an isolated incident." There was a pause. "So you're going to expose everything?" "I am, but at the right moment. If I come out now on the defensive, I'll look like someone trying to deflect attention. I need to build a solid case." "Madeline, be careful. Whoever is doing this has resources and a plan." "I know," Madeline said, looking at Robert, "and that's why I'm not alone." After hanging up, Madeline was silent. Robert waited. "Julianne is right," he said. "This was planned. And whoever did it has access to the hotel, someone on the inside." Madeline nodded. "Which brings me to a question. Who benefits from my fall?" Robert picked up a tablet. "Let me show you something." He opened financial documents. "I've been following Sovereign's stock movements. Something is strange." Madeline leaned in. "What did you find?" "In the last 6 months, blocks of shares were acquired by shell companies. Combined, they reach almost 15% of the capital." Madeline frowned. "I authorized the sale of minority shares last year for expansion. but 15% is more than I expected. And there's more, Robert continued. These companies, when you track them, lead to the same group, Meridian Equity Group. The name rang a bell in Madeline's memory. I know that fund. They tried to make an acquisition proposal 2 years ago, very aggressive. I refused. They didn't give up, Robert said. They changed strategy. Instead of buying openly, they're buying silently, and 15% already gives them significant power. Madeline felt a chill. So they could be behind this, the trap, the videos? I'm saying they have a motive, Robert answered. If they destabilize you, remove you from management, the share value drops. They buy cheaper, consolidate control, and remove you. It's a classic corporate coup. Madeline stood up, pacing the room. But how could they orchestrate something inside the hotel? They'd need someone on the inside. Her eyes widened. Richard, the general manager. He has access to everything, and his arrogance, the way he treated me, it was intentional, calculated. Robert nodded. He could be the piece on the board. The question is, does he know he's being used? Madeline picked up her phone. I need to talk to Sarah again. If Richard is involved, she might have seen something. Wait, Robert held her arm. It's past midnight. If you call now, you might put her at risk. If there is a conspiracy, they'll be alert to your every move. Madeline stopped. He was right. So what do I do, she asked. Stay here while my reputation is destroyed? You act with intelligence, Robert said. Tomorrow morning we'll have a meeting with my lawyers. We'll analyze Sarah's documentation, cross-reference it with the financial data, and build a solid case. And then, when you speak out, it won't be on the defensive. It will be on the attack with proof. Madeline looked at him, seeing his determination. It was so different from facing everything alone. Why are you doing this, Robert? She asked softly. Why are you getting so involved? He held her hand. Because 5 years ago I let you go without a fight. Because I regretted accepting it when you said it was better to end it. And because now, seeing you face this, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm not going to leave you alone. Madeline felt something break inside her. The tears she had held back all day finally came. Robert pulled her into an embrace, and she allowed herself to be vulnerable. They stayed like that for long minutes. When Madeline pulled away, she felt exhausted and strangely renewed. You can stay here tonight, Robert said. The guest room is ready. Madeline hesitated. The idea of going back to the hotel was unthinkable, but staying there reignited feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to handle. Robert smiled. No pressure, Madeline. I just want you to be safe. She nodded. Thank you. Robert took her to the guest room. He brought towels and one of his T-shirts for her to wear. His gestures were careful. When he turned to leave, Madeline called out, Robert! He stopped, looking back. I missed you. Every day. Me too, he replied. Sleep, Madeline. Tomorrow we face everything together. The door closed, leaving Madeline alone. She changed clothes, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. She picked up her phone and opened social media. The videos were still spreading. There were now analyses from influencers, articles, debates. Some defended hearing both sides, but most had formed an opinion. A notification caught her attention. It was a direct message from an unknown account. Madeline almost ignored it, but something made her open it. The message was short but devastating. I think exposing Richard will save you. This is much bigger than you imagine. Give up now, or what comes next will be much worse. You have until tomorrow at noon. Madeline sat up in bed, her heart racing. It wasn't just an image crisis, it wasn't just a corporate coup. It was a direct threat, clear and calculated. She got up and went to the living room, where Robert was still awake, working on his laptop. He looked up, saw her expression, and immediately stood. What happened? Madeline showed him the phone. He read the message and his expression darkened. We need to inform the authorities, he said. And say what? That I received an anonymous message on social media. They'll tell me to ignore it. Robert ran his hand through his hair, thinking, then let's make it harder for whoever is doing this. Tomorrow morning before noon, you're going to hold a press conference. You're going to expose everything, the manipulated videos, the discrimination at the hotel, Sarah's records, the suspicious stock movements. You're going to shine a light on everything, because whoever is behind this is counting on silence, on fear. We're not going to give them that victory. Madeline looked at him, seeing the determination and the courage he was trying to transmit to her. And for the first time since everything had started, she felt something beyond fear and anger. She felt hope. "Let's do it," she said, "but intelligently. Let's build a case they can't refute." Robert smiled. "That's the Madeline I know." They spent the next few hours working, organizing documents, making notes, and preparing strategies. When the sky began to lighten, announcing the dawn of a new day, Madeline knew the battle was only beginning. But now, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't fighting alone. Madeline sat on the bed, her heart racing. She stood up and went to the living room where Robert was still working. He looked up and immediately stood. What happened? Madeline showed him the phone. He read the message and his expression darkened. "Then let's make it harder for whoever is doing this," Robert said. "Tomorrow morning before noon you're going to hold a press conference. You're going to expose everything." Madeline looked at him. "Let's do it, but intelligently." They spent the next few hours working, organizing documents and preparing strategies. When the sky began to lighten, Madeline knew the battle was only beginning. But now, she wasn't fighting alone. The sun rose over New York, bringing a decisive day. Madeline woke at 6 in the morning after only 2 hours of sleep. She showered and dressed in a navy blue suit that conveyed authority. When she went down to the living room, Robert was already on the phone, coordinating with lawyers. The table had been transformed into a command center, with documents spread out and laptops open. "Good morning," he said. "Coffee is ready and the lawyers arrive in half an hour." Madeline served herself and sat down, picking up Sarah's notebooks. She began rereading every note. There were clear patterns, dates that repeated, names that appeared multiple times. Richard was at the center of it all, but there were mentions of others. Men in suits, closed meetings, orders that came from above. Robert sat beside her. "Find something?" Madeline pointed to a note. "Look at this." Sarah wrote that in March of last year, she saw Richard in a meeting with 2 men. She heard part of the conversation. One of them said something like, "We need to create conditions for the change to happen naturally." Robert took the notebook. March of last year was exactly when Meridian Equity began buying shares through shell companies. It can't be a coincidence. The doorbell rang. It was Robert's team, 3 specialist lawyers. Over the next 2 hours, every piece of evidence was examined, classified, and validated. The lawyers were meticulous, asking hard questions, testing every argument. Ms. Sterling, the crisis specialist, was direct. "Madeline, do you understand that by exposing this publicly, you will make powerful enemies? Meridian Equity has deep connections." "I know," Madeline replied. "But if I stay silent, they win. And it's not just about me, it's about all the people who were harmed. It's about ensuring this never happens again." The lawyer nodded. "Then let's do it right. The press conference will be at 11 o'clock. We'll do it at a neutral location, a hotel not in your chain, and we'll invite all relevant press." As preparations advanced, Madeline's phone rang. It was Sarah. "Miss Sterling," her voice was trembling, "I need to talk to you." Madeline felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" "This morning I was called by HR. They said I'm being transferred to Anchorage, Alaska, effective immediately. I have 24 hours to accept or resign. Miss Sterling, I can't leave New York. My mother is sick. My daughter goes to school here. My whole life is here." Madeline closed her eyes, feeling the rage. They were trying to silence Sarah. "Sarah, you are not going to Anchorage. You are not going to be fired, I promise. Can you give me 2 hours?" "I trust you." Madeline hung up and immediately called Julianne. "I need you to issue a corporate order now. All employee transfers from the Grand Sovereign are suspended until further notice. And I want Richard Caldwell removed from his duties immediately. Put someone trustworthy in his place." "Madeline, if I do that now, it will be clear you're taking back control." "That's exactly what I want," Madeline replied. "I want them to know I'm not backing down. Do it, Jules." When she hung up, Robert was by her side. "You just declared open war." "They declared it first," Madeline said. "I'm just responding." At 10:30, Madeline was in the ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel, a neutral establishment downtown. The space was packed with journalists, cameras, and photographers. Madeline was backstage. Robert was by her side. "Are you ready?" he said. "I am." "Remember, you stay in control. You have the truth on your side." Madeline nodded. Before going up, she turned to Robert and held his hand. Thank you for everything. He squeezed her hand. Go out there and show them who you are. Madeline walked onto the stage and positioned herself behind the podium. The noise died down until an expectant silence took over. Dozens of cameras were pointed at her, broadcasting live. She took a deep breath and began. Good morning. My name is Madeline Sterling, founder and CEO of the Sovereign Group. I am here to clarify the events of yesterday at the Grand Sovereign Hotel and to expose a much more serious situation I've discovered. She paused. The videos circulating show only edited fragments. The truth is this. Yesterday I decided to make an unannounced visit to the hotel, disguised as an ordinary guest, because I had been receiving serious reports of discrimination for months. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. She narrated in detail the entire experience, from arrival to expulsion. She showed excerpts from Sarah's notebooks, read specific accounts, and presented patterns documented over years. This is not about one problematic manager, Madeline continued. This is about a toxic culture that was allowed to exist, a culture that judges people by appearance, by origin, a culture that I myself, as the owner, failed to eradicate. She paused again with controlled emotion. I take responsibility. And today I am announcing concrete measures. First, all employees of the Grand Sovereign will undergo mandatory training. Second, I am creating an independent whistleblowing channel managed by an external company. Third, I am implementing surprise audits in all units conducted by specialized consultants. The room was silent. But there is another issue, Madeline said, her voice firmer. The videos were maliciously edited and strategically disseminated. It wasn't spontaneous. It was a calculated operation. And my investigations reveal connections with an investment fund that has been trying to take control of Sovereign through silent acquisitions. Murmurs arose. Cameras moved closer. I am making it public that Meridian Equity Group acquired through shell companies nearly 15% of Sovereign's shares. They did this without transparency, and now there is evidence they may be behind the manipulation of the videos to destabilize my management. Madeline placed documents on the podium. I have here records of the transactions, connections between the companies and the fund. I am making everything available to the press and regulatory authorities. She looked at the cameras. To whoever is behind this, my message is clear. I will not back down. I will not allow my company to be taken through manipulation. And I will not allow discriminatory practices to continue. I am ready to fight. Hands went up instantly. Madeline answered questions for 40 minutes with clarity, without dodging. When she finished, she knew she had taken the first decisive step. Backstage, Robert was waiting. You were perfect. Madeline felt the weight lift slightly. Now comes the hard part, waiting for the reaction. The reaction didn't take long. In the following minutes, social media exploded. The narrative began to shift rapidly. Influencers who had condemned Madeline retracted their statements. Analyses of the original videos circulated, pointing out the edits. Sarah's notebooks became a trending topic. But there was also negative reaction. Defenders of the fund issued indignant statements, denying involvement and threatening to sue. Nervous shareholders called. Speculators bet on the stock falling. Madeline's phone didn't stop. Julianne called to inform her that an emergency board meeting had been called for that afternoon. Some shareholders wanted answers. They're going to try to remove you, Julianne warned. They'll say you're putting the company at risk. Let them try, Madeline replied. I own 51% of the voting shares. The board meeting was brutal. The atmosphere was tense, faces were grim. 3 shareholders, all with ties to the financial sector, attacked her frontally. You've exposed the company to enormous legal risks, one said. Meridian will sue us. The shares dropped 7%. And they'll drop more if we do nothing, Madeline countered. Do you prefer a company that operates with discrimination? Do you want to be accomplices in a corporate coup? There is no concrete proof, another argued. You are making serious accusations based on speculation. Madeline put documents on the table. Here is the proof. Financial movements, connections, chronology. If you don't see the pattern, it's because you don't want to. The discussion lasted 3 hours. Madeline held her position, but she had created cracks in the board. Some were worried. Others had their own agendas. When she left the meeting, she was exhausted. Robert was waiting in the car. How was it? Brutal, but I survived. They went back to the apartment. Night fell over New York. Madeline sat on the sofa, took off her shoes, and allowed herself a moment of silence. Robert brought wine and sat beside her. You know this is far from over. I know, but we struck the first blow. They stayed in silence, sipping wine, feeling the closeness. Robert, Madeline said, why did you never marry in these 5 years? He looked at her, surprised. Because I never found anyone who made me forget you. I tried, Madeline. I went out with other people, but something was always missing. Madeline felt her heart tighten. Me too. Every man I met always bumped into a memory of you, into a standard you set that no one else could fill. Then why did we fight so much? Why did we let everything fall apart? Because I was afraid, Madeline admitted. Afraid you'd make me choose between you and my career. Afraid of depending on you so much that I'd lose my identity. Afraid that if it didn't work, I'd never recover. And now, Robert asked, do you still have those fears? Madeline looked at him. I still do. But now I also know that the fear of living without you is greater. Robert held her face. I never asked you to choose, I just wanted to be by your side. Not as someone who limited you, but as someone who empowered you. I know that now, Madeline said. At the time I couldn't see it. I was so focused on proving my independence that I didn't realize that accepting love isn't weakness. Robert kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation. It was a kiss that carried 5 years of longing, of love that never died. When they pulled apart, both knew something definitive had changed. Stay with me, Robert said. Not for a night, not until the crisis passes. Stay for real. Madeline looked at him, seeing the partner she needed. Yes, she said, yes. The following days were a whirlwind. Madeline's press conference had completely shifted the course of the public narrative, but it had also triggered an unprecedented corporate war. Meridian Equity Group vehemently denied any involvement, but the evidence presented by Madeline was too solid to be simply ignored. On the morning of the 3rd day after the press conference, Madeline woke up beside Robert for the first time in 5 years. The feeling was both familiar and new, comforting and terrifying. They had spent the previous night talking late, filling the gaps of the years they had been apart, rediscovering one another. Robert was still sleeping. Madeline got up carefully and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While the machine hummed, she picked up her phone and opened the news. The main headline of every paper was about her. Businesswoman exposes discrimination scheme and possible corporate coup. Sovereign Group shares recover after clarifying press conference. Meridian Equity denies accusations, but faces SEC investigation. Madeline smiled slightly. The tide was turning, but she knew the real battle was still ahead. The phone rang. It was Julianne, and her voice was urgent. Madeline, we need to talk now. Can you come to the office? What happened? I received an envelope this morning. No sender. The content is disturbing. Madeline felt a chill. I'm on my way. When Robert woke up, Madeline was already dressed, packing her bag. Where are you going? Julianne needs me. Something happened. Robert stood up immediately. I'm going with you. They reached the Sovereign Group office in 40 minutes. Julianne was waiting for them in the meeting room with a tense expression. On the table were a manila envelope and several scattered sheets. What is this? Madeline asked. Julianne pushed the sheets toward her. Documents, contracts, bank transfers, everything linking Richard Caldwell directly to Meridian Equity Group. He's been on their payroll for over a year. Madeline picked up the documents and began to read. Each page was more damning than the last. Richard had received substantial monthly payments from the fund. There were emails discussing strategies to destabilize Madeline's management. There was even a detailed plan to orchestrate situations that would harm the company's image. Who sent you this? Robert asked, examining the documents over Madeline's shoulder. I don't know, Julianne replied. The envelope appeared on my desk this morning when I arrived. None of the security guards saw anyone enter. The cameras didn't capture anything either. Someone from the inside, Madeline murmured. Someone who has access to the building but wants to remain anonymous. Or someone turning against the fund, Robert suggested. Maybe a disgruntled member or someone with a heavy conscience. Madeline looked at Julianne. Are these documents legitimate? I've already had our legal team check. Everything looks authentic. The bank transfers can be tracked, the emails have verifiable metadata. This is a bombshell, Madeline. Madeline felt a mixture of rage and validation. Now they had definitive proof. Richard wasn't just an arrogant and discriminatory manager. He was an undercover agent, deliberately sabotaging the company for the benefit of others. "We need to take this to the authorities," Madeline said, "and also make it public. The fund can't keep denying it if we have documented proof they were paying one of our employees." "But Madeline," Julianne hesitated, "if you do this, it will be clear that someone violated the fund's confidentiality to help you. They will retaliate brutally, not just against you, but against whoever leaked this." "I know," Madeline said, "but we can't protect an anonymous informant if we don't even know who it is, and the truth needs to come out. How many other companies is the fund trying to take this way? How many other Richards are out there?" Robert nodded. "She's right. This goes beyond Sovereign now. It's a matter of national corporate integrity." They spent the morning working with the legal team, preparing a new release, and organizing the evidence in an irrefutable way. Madeline also contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission directly, handing over copies of all documents. At 2 in the afternoon, Madeline made another announcement, this time in a video format recorded at the Sovereign office. She presented the new evidence methodically, showing each document and explaining each connection. The impact was immediate and devastating. Meridian Equity Group's shares began to plummet. Investors panicked. Other companies in which the fund had a stake began to be investigated. The financial press dedicated hours of coverage to the scandal. But the fund's reaction was swift and aggressive. That same night, they filed a defamation lawsuit against Madeline, seeking $50 million in damages. They also filed a court injunction trying to prevent her from speaking publicly about the matter. Madeline received the notification while having dinner with Robert at the apartment. She read the document with a somber expression. "They're trying to silence you through the courts," Robert said. "It's the classic tactic. Ensnare you in expensive and lengthy lawsuits until you give up or run out of resources." "They won't succeed," Madeline said with determination. "I have the truth on my side and enough resources to fight." But the pressure was mounting from all sides. The next day, Madeline received calls from 4 major corporate clients of the Sovereign chain, all cancelling their lodging contracts. The official justification was a re-evaluation of suppliers, but it was clear there was external pressure. Julianne brought the bad news personally. "We lost the contracts with Global Energy Corp, Miller Industries, Apex Tech, and Harrison Construction. That's almost $15 million in annual revenue." Madeline felt the blow. These weren't just numbers. They were relationships built over years. And now, because of political and economic pressure, they were being undone. "They have more reach than I imagined," Madeline admitted. "The fund is using every channel of influence they have." But it wasn't all bad news. That afternoon, Madeline received an unexpected call. It was Marcus Vinicius, one of the most respected businessmen in the country, owner of a holding company that controlled various technology and retail firms. "Miss Sterling," his voice was firm but cordial, "I've followed this whole situation closely. I'd like to speak with you personally, if possible." Madeline accepted the invitation, and 2 hours later was in an elegant cafe in Soho, sitting face-to-face with Marcus. He was a man in his 60s, with completely white hair, an intelligent expression, and a penetrating gaze. "I admire your courage," he said bluntly. "What you're doing isn't easy. Facing a powerful investment fund, exposing questionable corporate practices, all while defending ethical principles. It's rare to see that in the business world." "Thank you," Madeline said. "But I'm not doing this for heroism. I'm doing it because it's right." "Exactly why I want to help," Marcus said. "I have information that might be useful to you. Meridian Equity tried the same tactic with me 3 years ago. They wanted to buy a stake in my holding company through shell companies. When I refused and investigated, I discovered a pattern of predatory behavior." He slid a folder across the table. "It's all in here. Documents I kept tucked away, waiting for the right opportunity to use. I think now is that opportunity." Madeline opened the folder and began to flip through. They were detailed accounts of at least 5 other companies that had been targeted by the fund. Some resisted, others were taken over. There were clear patterns of manipulation, infiltration, and destabilization. "Why are you giving me this?" Madeline asked. "Because it's time someone took these guys down," Marcus replied. "And because if you succeed, you'll set a precedent for others to do the same. The American corporate world needs a cleaning. You can be the start of that." Madeline felt a wave of emotion. She wasn't alone in this fight. There were others who had also suffered, who also wanted justice. "I won't let you down," she promised. When she returned to Robert's apartment with the new folder of documents, she found him on the phone, his expression serious. He ended the call and looked at her. "We have a problem." "Another one?" Madeline asked, tired. "The fund got an injunction. You are prohibited from making any new public statements about them until the defamation lawsuit is judged. If you violate it, you could be held in contempt of court." Madeline sat heavily on the sofa, "So they managed to silence me." "Not completely," Robert said, sitting beside her. "You can't speak publicly, but your lawyers can, and third parties can. And most importantly, the authorities can. The SEC is investigating. The Department of Justice is too. The wheel is already in motion, Madeline. You started this, but now it has a life of its own." Madeline knew he was right, but the feeling of helplessness was frustrating. After taking the lead, after being proactive, she was now being forced into silence. Robert held her hand. "Hey, look at me." Madeline looked. "You've already done more than anyone could. You exposed the truth, mobilized authorities, and gained allies. Now it's time to let the process follow its course. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, your company, and your future." Madeline leaned her head on his shoulder. "And my present," she said softly. Robert kissed the top of her head. "And your present too." They stayed like that for long minutes, just feeling each other's presence. Then Madeline stood up with renewed determination. "If I can't speak publicly, I'll focus on what I can do. I'm going to completely reform Sovereign's culture. I'm going to ensure the episode at the Grand Sovereign never repeats in any unit. I'm going to turn this into something positive." And that was exactly what she did. In the following days, Madeline implemented profound changes. She personally visited each unit of the Sovereign chain, talked to employees, heard complaints, and identified problems. She fired managers who showed problematic behaviors. She promoted people who had been unfairly overlooked. Sarah, the maid who had kept the notebooks for years, was promoted to Supervisor of Human Resources for Diversity and Inclusion, a position created specifically to ensure the changes were real and lasting. The Grand Sovereign Hotel was completely restructured. All employees underwent intensive training. Service policies were rewritten with a focus on dignity and universal respect. Madeline also implemented an anonymous feedback system where guests could report problems directly to headquarters, bypassing local managers. The transformation wasn't easy. There was resistance. Some employees resigned, not wanting to adapt to the new requirements, but the majority embraced the changes. And slowly, the culture began to truly shift. Meanwhile, the investigations into the fund advanced. The SEC found irregularities in multiple transactions. The Department of Justice opened a formal inquiry. Other businessmen, encouraged by Madeline's example, began to come out of the shadows and report similar practices. 3 weeks after Madeline's press conference, Meridian Equity Group announced it was divesting all its holdings in the market and closing operations. Officially, it was a strategic decision. In practice, it was a crushing defeat. The news reached Madeline while she was in a meeting at the Grand Sovereign, now completely revamped. Julianne called with the information. "They gave up, Madeline. They surrendered." Madeline closed her eyes, feeling a massive weight being lifted from her shoulders. "We did it." "You did it," Julianne corrected. "You didn't give up when most would have." When the meeting ended, Madeline walked through the hotel alone. She passed the front desk, now staffed by a diverse team clearly trained to treat everyone with equal respect. She passed the restaurant, where new waiters served with genuine professionalism. She went up to the rooftop, where there was a small terrace with a view of the city. That was where Robert found her. "I knew you'd be here," he said, approaching. "How did you know?" "Because you always come up when you need to think, or when you need to feel like you've conquered something." Madeline smiled. "You know me too well." "Not enough," Robert said, standing beside her and looking at the city. I want to spend the rest of my life knowing you more." Madeline turned to him, surprised by the declaration. Robert took a small box from his pocket and knelt. "Madeline Sterling, in these last few days I've seen you face storms that would take down anyone. I've seen you fight for principles when it would have been easier to give up. I've seen you turn pain into change, humiliation into strength, and I fell in love with you all over again, as if it were the first time. Marry me, not because you need me, but because we are better together." Madeline felt tears streaming down her face. "Robert, You can think about it," he said softly. "You don't have to answer now. I know you need time, that you're afraid that—" "Yes," Madeline interrupted. "What?" "Yes," she repeated, smiling through the tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, because you're right, we are better together, and because I'm tired of being afraid of being happy." Robert stood up and kissed her, and in that moment, at the top of the hotel that almost destroyed her but that she transformed, Madeline finally felt complete. 6 months later, the Grand Sovereign Hotel was preparing for a special night. It wasn't just a reopening, it was a statement, a celebration of transformation, of resilience, and of rebirth. Madeline was in the presidential suite, being prepared by a makeup and hair team. But unlike other times, she wasn't alone there by choice. Julianne was with her, helping choose accessories, and Sarah was there too, no longer as a maid, but as a guest of honor and a fundamental member of the company's new structure. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride. "Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for everything. Without you, none of this would have happened." Sarah shook her head. "You made it happen. I just kept the memories. You had the courage to use them." Madeline smiled and held the woman's hand. "We made it happen together." A knock on the door announced Robert's arrival. He entered wearing an impeccable tuxedo, and Madeline felt her heart race. Even after months together, he still had that effect on her. "Can I steal my fiancé for a minute?" Robert asked. Julianne and Sarah exchanged knowing looks and left, leaving them alone. Robert approached and held Madeline's hands. "Are you ready?" "For the ceremony?" "Yes. For everything that comes after, I hope so." He smiled. "You were always ready, Madeline. You just needed to realize it." They went down together to the hotel's main ballroom, which had been completely renovated. Not just physically, but energetically. The people circulating there, staff and guests, carried something different. There was genuine joy, mutual respect, and a sense of belonging. The event began with Madeline stepping onto the stage. This time it wasn't to make accusations or defend herself. It was to celebrate. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice firm and clear. 6 months ago, this hotel was the stage for one of the most difficult moments of my life. I was humiliated, expelled, and treated as if I had no value. But that painful moment revealed a much more important truth, that this place, which I had created with so much love, had completely deviated from the values I stood for. She looked around, seeing attentive faces. "Today we are here not just to reopen this hotel, but to declare that we have changed, truly. We didn't change because it was convenient, or because external pressure demanded it. We changed because it was the right thing to do, because every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity, respect, and a warm welcome, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or how they present themselves." Applause filled the ballroom. Madeline continued, "I want to thank Sarah Jenkins, who had the courage to document injustices for 15 years, waiting for the right moment for the truth to come to light. I want to thank Julianne Vance, my partner and friend, who stayed by my side even when all seemed lost. And I want to thank Robert Montgomery, who reminded me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." She looked directly at Robert, who was in the front row, his eyes shining with emotion. "But mainly," Madeline said, "I want to thank all the people who suffered discrimination, who were disrespected, who were treated as less. Because your pain, when shared, when recognized, and when validated, turns into change, and change is what we are celebrating today." More applause. Madeline waved and stepped down from the stage, immediately surrounded by guests, journalists, and businessmen. Everyone wanted to congratulate her, praise her, and tell their own stories. In the middle of the crowd, Madeline saw a familiar face. It was Marcus Vinicius, the businessman who had handed her the crucial documents about Meridian Equity. "Congratulations, Madeline," he said, shaking her hand. You didn't just save your company. You changed the game for all of us. Since your exposure, 5 other predatory funds have been investigated and closed operations. You started a wave of corporate accountability. I didn't do it alone, Madeleine said sincerely. No one does anything alone, Marcus agreed. But someone needs to take the first step, and you did. The night went on with music, conversation, and genuine celebration. Madeleine moved through the ballroom, talking to old and new employees, hearing stories, and absorbing the positive energy filling the space. At one point, she found herself back in the restaurant where it had all started. The setting was physically the same, but completely different in essence. She sat at the table where she had been humiliated, where Richard had treated her with contempt. Robert found her there. Memories, he asked, sitting beside her. Yes, Madeleine said, but they aren't painful. They are memories of transformation. You know, if that hadn't happened, maybe I never would have discovered what was wrong. Maybe I would have remained blind, comfortable, and ignorant. Sometimes pain is the best teacher, Robert said. Madeleine nodded. And sometimes vulnerability is the greatest strength. They sat there for a few minutes in comfortable silence, just watching the restaurant function in a completely different way. The waiters served all customers with equal attention. The maître d' smiled genuinely at every person who arrived. There were no more subtle judgments, no evaluative looks, no veiled discrimination. Madeleine, Robert said softly, there's something I want to give you. He took an envelope from the inner pocket of his jacket and handed it to her. Madeleine opened it and found 2 plane tickets. London, she read. 2 weeks. Our honeymoon, Robert said. I know we've only been engaged for 3 months and the wedding is 6 months away, but I thought we deserved some time just for us, away from all this, from companies, lawsuits, scandals, just the 2 of us, rediscovering the world together. Madeleine felt tears welling up. Robert, it's perfect. So you accept? She kissed him in response. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The party continued until late. When the last guests finally left, Madeleine stayed a few more minutes in the empty lobby, just absorbing the moment. Julianne approached. You did something incredible, Madeleine, she said. Not just for the company, but for all of us. You reminded us that values matter more than profits. Profits are important, Madeleine corrected with a smile, but not at any cost. And I discovered that when you do the right things for the right reasons, the profits come naturally. Julianne hugged her friend. I'm proud of you and of being a part of all this. When Madeleine finally left the hotel that night, hand in hand with Robert, she felt she had completed a cycle. She had faced her worst fears, fought against seemingly invincible forces, and emerged not just a winner, but transformed. The car took them back to Robert's apartment, which was now Madeleine's too. They had decided to move in together 2 months ago, a natural step in a relationship that seemed destined from the start. In the elevator, Robert pulled her into an embrace. You know I love you, right? I know, Madeleine said, and I love you, in a way I never thought was possible again. In a way that was always possible, Robert corrected. We just needed time to find our way back to each other. When they entered the apartment, Madeleine went straight to the balcony. She loved that view of the lit-up city, that feeling of being above it all but still connected. Robert joined her, bringing 2 glasses of champagne. A toast, he said, to the future. Madeleine took the glass and raised it. To the future and to the past that brought us here. They toasted and drank, the effervescent liquid celebrating the moment. Are you afraid, Robert asked, of the wedding, the future, of everything? Yes, Madeleine admitted honestly, but it's not the paralyzing fear of before. It's a healthy fear that keeps me alert but doesn't stop me from moving forward. It's the only kind of fear worth having, Robert agreed. They stayed on the balcony until late, talking about plans, dreams, and possibilities. Madeleine spoke about her vision to expand the sovereign chain not just in size, but in social impact. She wanted every hotel to be a model of inclusion, respect, and dignity. Robert spoke about his own companies, about how Madeleine's example had inspired him to review internal policies and question practices he accepted without thinking. They challenged each other, inspired each other, and complemented each other. When they finally went to sleep, exhausted but happy, Madeleine had one last reflection before drifting off. She had started that journey alone, disguised as any other guest, wanting to discover the truth. And she had discovered much more than she expected. She discovered that her own empire was contaminated by practices she loathed. She discovered that there were powerful forces trying to destroy her. She discovered that vulnerability could be strength. She discovered that asking for help wasn't weakness. And she discovered that the love she thought she had lost forever was still there, waiting for a second chance. More importantly, she discovered that real change is possible, that one person with courage and determination can make a difference, that the truth, however painful it may be initially, is always liberating in the end. Months turned into a year. Madeleine and Robert's wedding was an elegant but intimate celebration with close friends and family. The honeymoon in London was everything they dreamed of and more. And when they returned, it was to resume the work of transformation with renewed vigor. The Sovereign Group became a national reference in diversity and inclusion. Other hotels began to copy their policies. Universities used the case as a study in ethical management. Madeleine was invited to speak at corporate events, always telling her story with brutal honesty, without sugarcoating the mistakes or hiding the failures. Richard Caldwell, the manager who had started it all, was convicted of embezzlement and conspiracy. He received a 3-year sentence, which he partially served. When he got out, he tried to contact Madeleine to apologize. She accepted the apology, not because she forgot what he did, but because she believed in redemption. Meridian Equity Group never returned to the market, but other similar funds learned the lesson, becoming more transparent, more ethical, or at least more careful. And Madeleine, the woman who was once expelled from her own hotel, became a symbol of resistance, transformation, and courage. Not because she was perfect, but because she had the honesty to admit imperfections and the determination to change them. 2 years after the original incident, Madeleine was back at the Grand Sovereign Hotel. This time, not disguised, not hidden. She walked openly through the lobby, greeting employees by name, stopping to talk to guests, listening to feedback, always attentive. She stopped at the entrance of the restaurant, observing the movement. She saw a middle-aged woman dressed simply, being received by the maitre d' with a genuine smile and led to an excellent table. She saw a young couple, clearly nervous about the luxurious environment, being treated with patience and respect. She saw a group of international businessmen receive the same level of attention as a family of tourists. She smiled. That was what she had always wanted. Not perfection, because perfection doesn't exist, but genuine effort, real commitment, values that transcend profits. Robert approached from behind, wrapping her in an embrace. "What are you thinking about?" "How much everything has changed," Madeleine said, "and how it all began." "It began with a brave woman making a difficult choice," Robert said, "and it continues with that same woman making the right choices every day." Madeleine turned and kissed him. "Us making the right choices." "Us," Robert agreed. And there, in the place where she was almost destroyed, Madeleine Sterling felt stronger than ever. Because she had learned the most important lesson, that true power doesn't come from controlling everything, but from having the courage to face what is wrong, change what can be changed, and ask for help when necessary. She had found her way back to love, to strength, and to herself. And in the process, she had transformed not just a hotel, but an entire culture. The sun set over New York, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Madeleine and Robert left the hotel hand in hand, walking toward the future they were building together. A future based on truth, respect, and love. A future that had begun with pain, but now shone with infinite possibilities. The end. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Madeleine and Robert has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of resilience, courage, and love, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you most. Was it Madeleine's strength in facing